So welcome to the inaugural Conversations with Corey. This is going to be a program where I'll sit down with various friends, colleagues, and peers and subject matter experts. And we're going to have open and honest conversations about topics. And these topics will all align with the DE&I work that we're doing here at AT&T. And they will align with one of our core values, which is stand for equality. Standing for equality is and will continue to be a core value here at AT&T. We have been a very proud ally of the LGBTQ plus community since 1975. AT&T has supported the Trevor Project since 2011. And since 2018, we have committed more than $2.75 million to the Trevor Project. And it's an organization that inspires me individually, personally, but also in the work that we're doing here with AT&T. It happens to be the world's largest organization for suicide prevention and crisis intervention for LGBTQ plus youth. And so as a part of the work that we're doing for this year's Pride Month, we announced our most recent commitment to the Trevor Project, which is a 2-year, $750,000 commitment. And then Warner Media also is doing a PSA and as a part of that effort as well. So our goal is to help the Trevor Project increase volunteerism and then to just shine a spotlight on the mental health crisis that is happening in the community. So as a part of this inaugural conversation, I invited, you guys heard me mention a little earlier, an expert in this work and a person who is really doing a tremendous amount in this work to talk to us about the Trevor Project and then even more importantly, how you can get involved. And so please join me in welcoming Munir Panjwani, who is the Vice President of Foundation, Government, and Corporate Partnerships at the Trevor Project. So Munir, welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Corey. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, hey, let's start. Let's create a foundation in this conversation initially, because we can't assume that everyone in the audience knows what the Trevor Project is and the work that you all do. So can we start just by giving us a little bit of the history of the Trevor Project?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Trevor Project is the world's largest suicide prevention organization for LGBTQ young people. Our mission is simple, which is to end suicide among LGBTQ young people. And it is a critical mission that we have today. It was actually founded over 20 years ago, based off of a movie called Trevor, which won the Oscar in 1998. HBO bought the rights to the movie. And right before it was about to air, the producers paused the airing and said, we can't air this movie until we provide a resource at the end of it, so that just in case there are LGBTQ youth out there who are considering suicide, they have somewhere to go. And what they found was there was no organization at the time that was doing this work. So they asked HBO to pause the movie until they could start an organization, and that organization was called the Trevor Project. So Ellen DeGeneres introduced the movie, and at the end of the movie, we aired our phone line, our Trevor Lifeline number, and the phone started ringing immediately, and it has not stopped ringing since. And of course, in that time, since 1998, we have grown considerably to be able to serve more and more LGBTQ youth, and we've expanded our services to now offer free, confidential, 24/7 support to LGBTQ youth over phone, text, and chat. We also do a bunch of research on LGBTQ mental health, as well as provide educational trainings to youth serving adults so that there are better allies for LGBTQ youth wherever they may be. And also doing a ton of work around creating digital spaces for LGBTQ youth to find community, especially globally. So we have a program called Trevor Space that does that. So that's just a brief intro on what we do. We do a lot more, so I'm really excited to dive into more of what we do and how AT&T supported us.
Yeah, and I want to make sure too that we have an opportunity to talk a little more about Trevor Space and some of the other initiatives, because there is alignment with how you all are reaching out and connecting with this youth. And when you think about part of our mission here at AT&T around connectivity and what we do. So we're going to come back to that. But one of the other things I want to make sure that the audience is grounded on is, and this data is sobering, disappointing, heartbreaking, staggering every time I look at it, and I know it very well, right? Because we've been working in this space for some time. But you all estimate, the Trevor Project estimates that, more than almost 2 million, 1.8 million LGBTQ plus youth in the United States seriously consider suicide each year, and that at least one LGBTQ plus youth attempts suicide every 45 seconds. So I want those of you that are listening, just sit with that for a second. Every 45 seconds, there is an attempted suicide in this community. So Munir, can you just talk to us a little bit about that, right? And the findings and in this need around resources to help to try and prevent that.
Yeah. And like you said, these statistics are really sobering, right? They're heartbreaking to think that every 45 seconds, every minute that goes by, there's somebody who's thinking about ending their life just because they happen to be LGBTQ. So when we look at broadly about suicide as an issue with the LGBTQ community, but more broadly even for young people, suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people. And that is only after accidents, right? So accidents are not necessarily in our control, but suicide is under control. It is preventable. So that is where Trevor plays a really big part in making sure that people understand the severe risk that LGBTQ youth have for suicide. And that risk is actually that LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their cisgender and straight peers. So you can tell just by that statistic that the amount of the scale of the crisis that LGBT youth are facing on a regular basis, and the need for Trevor to provide his services exponentially every single year. So when we sort of break that down a little bit further, we know that 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered suicide in the last year alone, and more than half of transgender and non-binary youth have attempted suicide in the last year. So again, these are really, really sad statistics, and I can go on and on about the statistics, but something I want to call out here is that Trevor also knows that one supportive adult can reduce a person's chance of suicide by 40%. So yes, there are a lot of sad statistics, but there's also something to be hopeful for. When we think about the role that each of us can play in the lives of LGBTQ people, just being supportive to a person in our lives can actually save that person's life and severely just decrease their chance of suicide.
So Munir, and thanks for sharing that. What is driving that disproportionate impact, right? I mean, and we all have read and we see what is happening, unfortunately, with this crisis in the youth period. But why, you just shared with us 4x, 4 times the rate for this community. What is underneath that? What is driving that?
There are many different factors. There's not one reason why LGBTQ youth are at higher risk of suicide, right? There's certainly family rejection that plays a huge part in it. We found that only 1 in 3 LGBTQ youth said that their households and their families are affirming to them, which means 2 in 3 are not in a household that is affirming to them. We also know that what's happening at the national scale in our politics and national cultural conversation, the way we talk about LGBTQ identity and the way that we talk about taking away people's rights or taking away trans kids' ability to get gender affirming care or to play in sports that match their gender identity. All these things matter to young people, that if these laws are passed and if these policies are passed, and if we're not supporting LGBTQ young people, they're getting the message that they are not valued, that they are not important, that there's something wrong with them, and it builds a level of shame and guilt in them about just who they are. And of course, we all remember when we were young that there's so many challenges that we go through every day, and to have to find a community that celebrates you is really, really hard for LGBTQ young people. So there's the family rejection piece, there's the culture piece, there's also lack of mental health care. We know that LGBTQ youth want mental health care, but many of them don't actually have access to getting the care that they need and that they deserve. So a lot of these issues are actually preventable. When we give people the care that they need, they can get the support that they need and be able to find the strength and the tools and the resiliency to get out of whatever the feelings that they're having, move through it, have the tools to be able to process those emotions if they come up again, and then be able to prevent mental health crises in the future. So there are a lot of different factors that play into it. And the way Trevor sort of likes to think about this is, we are at the front lines of young people who are in a crisis or about to enter a crisis, right? But I think it is a community, a country, a culture-wide problem that we need to address holistically, looking at the structures of how mental health care is prioritized and the way that we provide access to that care for many communities.
One of the things you just said is so important in the work that we're doing here at AT&T and what we constantly talk about at AT&T. Because I know some folks may hear everything that you shared and say, well, I'm not a part of that problem, right? Or I don't have that challenge to deal with. But the point you just made is, when I asked you about the factors, the environment, right? The environment. So even if it's not necessarily in your household, so you think about what we can do as individuals. What type of environment are we creating? How are we having the conversations around the LGBTQ plus community overall? And how that plays into how these young folks view themselves and the challenges that they have. So we all have a responsibility to try and prevent this as much as possible. So on that note, Munir, when you think about all of the support and the partnership that I referenced earlier, right, of AT&T or from AT&T to the Trevor Project, talk to us a little bit about how that is helping you all in with the work that you're doing or driving impact.
Absolutely. The partnerships that we build with companies like AT&T really help us further our work and actually help us scale the work that we're able to do, right? The nonprofit sector is dependent on lots of different people and organizations to contribute their funds and their resources to us so that we can continue to be innovative in our approach, but also be able to support the community in the best way that we can. So when I think about the history of AT&T support, AT&T supported us since 2011, so we're actually celebrating our 10th year anniversary of our partnership. But the most significant gift came in 2017 when we had a new leadership in the organization, and we also realized the amount of work that we needed to do in building the infrastructure of the organization to be able to scale our work, right? So looking at technology, like what do we actually need to do on a technological infrastructure perspective to be able to build the capabilities to be able to take tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of calls, texts, and chats. And AT&T being a communications company and a company that's focused on connectivity and technology and innovation, it made a lot of sense for us to partner on it. So that was the first time that Trevor received a seven-figure gift from a corporate partner, which was provided by AT&T, and that was a multi-year partnership that was worth over $1.3 million for us. That really changed the game for us because that did one of two things, right? The first one is really looking at getting substantial funding that we can then just use to hire the best people, to get the best technology, to hire the best consultants to build the technology, be able to test it in the right way, and then hire the right number of staff members to be able to staff up our capacity to serve more people. And then secondly, the amount of marketing campaigns that we did with AT&T during that time really raised the awareness about Trevor Project services. One of the main things that I'd love to talk about always is volunteers are at the heart of what we do. We need hundreds and more than 1,000 volunteers over the next couple of years to be able to serve the 1.8 million people that need our support. And we ran our first brand-supported volunteer recruiting campaign with AT&T a couple of years ago. And the response to that was incredible. We couldn't believe the number of applications that we got as a result of that. So we're doing that same thing again this year because there's never enough volunteers for us, because the more volunteers we have, the more people that we can support.
So that is, and we're going to talk a little more about that as well in the conversation about the volunteerism and how our employees can get more involved. You mentioned in your opening remarks about how you are connecting with the youth in a number of different ways, and one of those is text and chatting. So I love this. I love how you all continue to evolve, how you're able to provide services to the youth. Talk to me a little bit about Trevor Text and Trevor Chat and how that's changing or reshaping how you interact with the youth.
Yeah, so Trevor Text and Trevor Chat is our fastest growing service, not surprisingly, right? Young people like to use digital services now. What I'll say is that last year, we supported 150,000 young people via phone, text, and chat. A little less than half of them were still phone calls. So young people are still using the phone to call us. But the other half was actually a significant increase from the year before in text and chat. We know that it is a lot more scalable way for us to serve more people. But also when we think about marginalized identities, so for example, immigrant communities, young people whose first language is not English, they're able to edit their text and then send it in a way that they feel comfortable with, rather than feeling really nervous and anxious about using their voice in a certain way, right? Or not speaking language in the way that they feel comfortable with. Trans and non-binary folks prefer to use text and chat because it gives them more accessibility. Where on the phone, somebody may misgender you by hearing your voice and assuming that you identify as a specific gender, but you may not. So text gives them the ability to really be themselves And then lastly, when we think about accessibility and anonymity, text and chat provide that anonymity that a lot of young people need, right? Talking on the phone is not necessarily private. Anybody can hear you. And a lot of young people that we serve don't actually have the privacy that they need to have these difficult conversations. So they can text us from under the desk at the school. They can go to the bathroom for 10 minutes and text us. They could text us under the sheets when they're sleeping. So there are many different ways that they can use digital crisis services to reach out to us.
Cool, cool. So let's shift gears a little bit. Volunteering, right? How the audience and our employees and others listening in can get involved. Give me a sense of what that volunteer experience, what a typical volunteer experience would look and feel like for one of our employees.
Yeah. So I'll say the volunteering experience is one of the most life-changing and rewarding experiences a lot of volunteers tell us it is. And that is because you are literally saving people's lives, right? Having a 2-hour shift where you talk to a couple of young people and getting them off the cliff, having them create a work plan that provides safety for them for the next couple of days, having them think through their feelings and attach words to those feelings to be able to better understand themselves. These are really important life skills that we're giving young people to be able to not just survive this one moment, but actually survive any other moment that comes afterwards. So the process to get to becoming a volunteer is a little lengthy. It is a commitment because we can't put just anybody onto taking calls with people in crisis. So there's a 35 to 40 hours of training that people have to go through. What happens is once you're done with the training, then you go through role plays where you get to experience what a real conversation might look like with a young person. And that role play actually happens in 2 ways. One is with one of our staffers, and other is actually an AI chatbot that we've just created that helps to mimic the conversation that a young person might be having. That role play really reinforces the skills the volunteers have learned. And then once they pass that, they can start taking on shifts. Our hope is that if we're investing 40 hours of our resources into a person, that they'll commit to at least 2 to 4 hours of service per week for about a year.
Got it. Got it. So the training, self-paced, it's modularized, so you have the ability to time shift,
Yep.
right, in terms of how and when you engage in the training. And then once you go through that training, you do some role playing, then we get to a point where the person is actually ready to engage with some of the youth that's calling in.
You got it.
Got it. And so it's real. I like to describe it as obviously for all the reasons we've talked about, it's life impacting. But this is real volunteerism, right? So it's not necessarily just showing up on Saturday morning at the car wash and do it for a couple of hours and leave. It's a commitment. It's a commitment, and not to be derogatory of those efforts because those are needed as well. But this involves a commitment. But man, the impact and the point you made a little earlier, Munir, when you said it's literally changing and saving lives. So hey, let me widen the aperture a little bit, right? Let me widen the aperture before I lose you because we have to respect your time. And I will ask this question of every expert that we interact with in this forum. And that is for the segment that they are speaking to and the community that they are supporting and speaking to. I'm going to always widen the aperture and say, hey, what advice would you give us for those of us that do not identify as a part of that community? But how do we improve our allyship? How do we become a better ally to the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, I love this question. This is Pride Month. So a lot of people think Pride Month is about celebrating LGBTQ identity, and it is, but it's actually also a call to action for non-LGBTQ people to come into the movement with us and to take responsibility for some of the actions that they can take to be part of this movement, because we're all in this together, right? Everybody knows somebody who's LGBTQ, and we don't know what's happening behind the scenes to them. So what we do know at Trevor is that one supportive adult can decrease a person's chance of suicide by 40%. So the question is, how do you become that supportive person? And we always say, start with empathy, right? Ask yourself, in what ways can I be empathetic to the people around me, right? So creating safe, affirming spaces for LGBTQ young people is incredibly important. It has proven to save lives. When you normalize conversations about gender and sexual orientation, when you respect people's pronouns, when you allow for curiosity to come in when you're discussing some things that you don't understand, when you ask a lot of questions to a young person who's just starting to come out, when you share the resources that Trevor has available with your network, with your community, that's one actionable thing that I would say people should start doing, which is start becoming curious about the community, take some action. Allyship really requires action. It is not a passive term. So ask yourself this month, what is one thing that I can do to be an ally to the community?
Great, great. Well, look, Manir, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and to share with us today and help educate and raise our level of awareness on this challenge for sure. There are a couple of data points because I know we shared a lot of them over the last few minutes, but there are a couple that really stand out in my head and hopefully it will in yours as well. Number one, 45 seconds. Every 45 seconds, an LGBTQ plus youth attempts suicide. Every 45 seconds. So just think about the amount of time you've been tuned into this conversation. Then that's probably at least 20 individuals that have attempted suicide. That's staggering. And then the other data point that stands out is that when an adult intervenes and interacts with the youth, they are 40% less likely to attempt suicide. So that's how we can help. That's how we can continue to help collectively as a company and you as individuals, a role that you can play here to just really, really mitigate the impacts here. 45 seconds, 40% less likely if one of us is involved. So on that note, I encourage all of you to lean in, make sure you're joining us in the work that we're doing around AT&T if you're not already in supporting the LGBTQ plus community. And I also want to give you a reminder. So as part of our fundraising efforts, we do have a hashtag that can help drive donations to the campaign. So every time you use hashtag #TurnUpTheLove, again, hashtag #TurnUpTheLove on Instagram or Twitter, we will donate $10 to the Trevor Project up to $125,000. That's in addition to all of the other commitments that we've talked about already. And then if you are a consumer, if you happen to be listening in as well, in our participating retail stores, AT&T will donate another $500 up to $250,000 to the Trevor Project when a new or an existing customer mentions the Trevor Project and when you buy a new line on a qualifying plan with us as well. Also, for more information on ways to support our efforts, be sure to visit our Turn Up the Love website at turnupthelove.com. And if you want to learn more about the Trevor Project and how you can get involved in their work, be sure to visit thetrevorproject.org. Again, thetrevorproject.org. So Manir, before we close, anything else you would add into the conversation on how employees or customers can get involved with this work?
Yeah, Corey, you covered it all. The only thing I'll make a push for is to go to thetrevorproject.org/volunteer if you want to become a life-saving volunteer with us. We're accepting applications on a rolling basis. So it's a very easy process. Just get on there, learn more, sign up, and we'll be in touch very soon.
Cool, fantastic. So thanks again, Manir, for being here with us, taking your time to educate us and raise the level of awareness and help us understand how we can join you in this work. So we appreciate it. Keep doing it, and we're going to keep supporting you. And to all of you that tuned in today, thanks for joining the inaugural conversation, and we will have many more of these as we go forward.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Thank you.